Coin live. All right. Hello out there, internet, out there in YouTube land. We're coming to you live for you people in the future on October 19th, 2025, approximately 8:37 p.m. at night, right? So this morning I jumped on here and started this live stream for you that pops on here and seems like, am I having deja vu? Am I crazy? Did the Color Mouse do a stream this morning? Yes, I did. And amazingly enough, about 26 minutes into it, wouldn't you know it, a storm appeared outside. When I started the stream, it was a little bit cloudy, a tad overcast, nothing really big. And during the stream, a huge storm came through and messed up the internet. We have our internet provider sending us emails and texts saying service may be interrupted and everything. So we are on an Ethernet cable to see if we can get through this in one shot tonight, right? So yeah, it's a lovely October evening with some rain, the good rain, the kind that you can sleep through. So if you are new here, watching in the future, or you're popping in now, make sure that you have subscribed to the channel. Make sure you have liked the video and hit the bell so you know when we do this. Because with the upcoming winter months, we will definitely be on this. And there's a lot that's been going on this week that finally give me something that I'm interested to really talk about in the fields of pop culture, in comic books, in Halloween, music, all sorts of things. It's kind of wild that we all come together like that. So yeah, it's a really eventful time. Amazingly enough, right? So if you have joined me here on a Sunday afternoon before the work week starts, all right. So this is our last grasp at having a little bit of free time to free our mind, to be in the moment, not to have their thoughts racing as we think about work coming up and stuff, right? So it's great to see everybody again, right? So again, we'll see if we can get through this with the false storms that are going on, and see if we can get through this. Right. So a couple of things that have come on as you can have happened as we get through uh, get through our week here. Um, One of the things that I've done, why I haven't really been on YouTube a bit, is that we have been traveling. Right, I went and saw the Lost Boys with my wife in a theater. It ended up being a great party. We made a weekend out of it. The theater filled up. It was a Halloween theme. People love the Lost Boys. I saw it in 19, is it 87 that movie came out, and we watch it regularly here in the house to this day. I've always kept that on deck with like Fright Night and a few other things from the 80s. There's the Nightmare at Elm Streets and Indiana Jones and some of the Back to the Futures and all those great movies from the 80s and stuff, right? But Lost Boys was that one that I absolutely loved. I remember probably watching it in theater 3 times in a row by myself, with friends, second set of friends, who knows. So we got to see that. The a local a theater. When I say local, probably about an hour away. They're showing movies throughout the month, retro movies. Today we went and watched Spirited Away, and then what was it? I think last month we watched Howl's Moving Castle, and in between that, Lost Boys and things, right? But it was fantastic. Went to a Spirited Away, Spirited Halloween shop, if you will. Bought a cheap pair of $5 fangs to put in our mouth. They had a place to where they had a bunch of hanging bats and your orange and black balloons where you take your picture like at the prom. And then we got there early, and that place filled up. It filled up like it was quite the party. That theater was just booming, and they had door prizes. Now, yesterday, guys, I've talked about purging the collection and going through a lot of the books and getting a little bit proactive on getting rid of this stuff, because basically the sets of books, the collection I've had, the Alan Moore series that I have complete, the Watchmen stuff, Sandman stuff, all those great dollars from Dark Knight Returns, the keys, the signed books, the Silver Age stuff. I think one day I'm going to find a reputable auction to do that, and that is probably out towards Roanoke, Virginia, or maybe out towards North Knoxville or something, right? I'm going to find an auction house that's around and has quite a following, right? But in the meantime, we had a local comic book convention yesterday, Tazewell Comic Con. And it was yesterday, and I set up there. If you have me on Facebook, you can go to my channel page, play around, find the links. I think in the community tab or whatever they have. I haven't looked at it forever. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. And I posted pictures. But this con that is in town is a free con run by the local library. A table cost me $10. I set up quite a while ago, saying if I want to do this, let's do this. And this is a con that was mostly for kids in the area, people who aren't really into comics or have been exposed to an actual comic book convention, say something big like Heroes Con or things like that. So the last couple of years that they've done this, it's not a very old con. I would ride down there because it was free. It's less than 5 minutes from me, if not at 5 minutes. And I would walk around and get through the whole thing in 20 minutes. And it was crafts and free books that were donated to the library by actual Marvel or somebody. I think they gave them to libraries across the country and stuff, right? But this year, something happened. What I did is I set up 2, 3 boxes for dollar books. It was beat up comics, things I'll just never read again, things that I looked up. And I had a moment where I'm like, I better double check a few of these things. I better make sure they are, you know, very common books. And I ended up finding quite a few books that were priced $25 to $30. And I'm like, that can't be. I bought them in a dollar box. And then it dawned on me. I bought them in a dollar box in 1994. So I was able to shrink it down to 2 boxes instead of 3. I got a bunch of trades out. I did $5 soft cover, $10 trades. A few of them I did pop up at 20, and I did very well. This thing exploded this year. It was twice the size that it's ever been. There were people promoting other local comic book conventions. There are people there who had comics. I found out in this small little town there is at least 1 or 2 other people who really are into comics. And if I drew a circle from the center of that convention, there's people who drew about an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour to get there to set up. It was a great day, great cosplay, great contest. I got to see people excited. My first sale was with a cosplayer who she dressed up. I don't know if she was a teen or early 20s, whatever. I had a Harley Quinn hardcover book that was a bunch of art, her covers and Neil Adams pinups and all sorts of things. And she was so excited to get that. Walking Dead. But the biggest thing I did notice, the difference is that it seems like a lot of the younger folk, even though they do kind of want to get into comics, they are highly influenced by shows like Walking Dead and I guess some of the CW stuff. It, Even now, they kind of grew up on it, and of course the movies. But what I did is I laid out a bunch of stuff on the table. They don't really want to dig through the boxes to find stuff. I don't know if it's a sensory overload thing or if it's just a foreign concept. To me, that's the great thrill of the hunt. Anyone I've ever known in comics, that's the thrill of the hunt. That was fantastic. So yeah, I thought that was kind of it to find out. So it's just kind of cool to see how the generations have evolved and stuff. If I laid things out, that went pretty quick. Also, what amazed me was as I went through those boxes, I found some comics that were just beat up. I mean, they were shredded and chewed and disconnected from the cover, and the cover wasn't complete. And I set those to the side. Those were garbage. They were not to be sold. And this one guy, and I guess his grandpa or something, saw them and they just reached over there and grabbed them, and I made a little deal. I also was able to hustle quite a bit on, I made a game of it. My job is to get the money out of your pocket into my hand. And I had a few people there. They didn't bring a lot of money. They were there for the cosplay and just to be on the scene. And they were like, I only have $4. I better put these books back. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, I will give you 5 comics for $4 and things like that. So I had some fun with it. Right. So yeah, a great way to go. So I ended up making, uh, a bit more than I highly expected with what I consider, I hate to use the word junk, but if you have a huge collection and there's, even though and things like that, it was books that were beat up and I probably never would have gotten rid of. It also amazed me what didn't sell. That's what really got me. The books that were in fantastic shape, my Fables, my Secret Six, my DC stuff, my iZombie, some more modern Marvel stuff. JSA sold when there were some Avengers books that didn't. Things like that just amazed me. You could not predict what's going to sell. Walking Dead was big, right? Walking Dead is still big. That really amazed me with the kids. And we got John here, JP Fawn. Hey, how are you guys? Rest in peace, Ace. We're going to talk about that. I give people some time to get in here. Good evening. Glad you're back after your unfortunate morning debacle. Thank you. I was asked about what happened this morning. So I went over it at the beginning, but now that more people are stepping in here, what happened, guys, this morning at the live show? Unbeknownst to me, the local weather did say it was going to rain later in the afternoon. We had plans, which we have done since then. We went out, drove out of town, met some dear friends, had lunch, went and watched at some Mexican, and I went to Mexican and ordered a cheeseburger. Go figure. And then we went and watched Spirited Away, the movie, in the theater. Came back home. But what was happening this morning, unbeknownst to me, because this room is half underground, the back. If you were to look at the back of the house is underground. It was cloudy. And as we got into about 20, 25 minutes of the show, the storm hit, unbeknownst to me. I love that word, unbeknownst. And it showed that I was buffering. Someone commented it was buffering. And strangely enough, YouTube let me keep talking. So I had a 54-minute show that only 26 minutes showed up for you guys. So yeah, it was due to that. And right now I'm on an Ethernet cable to keep this going because we have had alerts all day from our provider saying that services have gone down and may be affecting us because of the huge storms. While we were eating today, even in a town over, it stormed immaculate, while we were eating. And then it stormed even more while we were in the theater. We could hear the storm hitting pretty hard on the roof of the theater. So yeah, we're having a bunch of storms right now, right? And apparently they're going to carry on up until midnight. So it may happen again. So with that, and everybody coming back to watch us, to watch this, I appreciate it, and I get to be a little bit more refined. Sadly enough, doubt I will be when I'm shooting from the hip and it's more spontaneous. I feel like the show probably was better this morning, and hopefully I can be as open and honest and spontaneous as that, right? So anyway, the Tazle Comic Con. If you are in the area, I say hit it next year because it finally gelled this year. It became an actual con this year. It was amazing. It was fantastic. So I guess the first thing we want to talk about, I'm gonna have to keep an eye on the time here. We lost. It's been a rough few years, right? I sadly am somebody who is still kind of reeling from George Perez passing away, from Keith Giffen. I'm also reeling a little bit from Ozzy, which it wasn't expected. It was expected if you follow me. Ozzy Osbourne passed away. Lemmy Kilmister passed away a few years ago, and I'm still kind of. And then David Bowie years before that, I'm still kind of back and forth with that. It just amazed me how some of these people can affect you who are in the zeitgeist and stuff, right? And then we have people who formed, I'm still bothered about Freddie Mercury passing away, Charles Schultz, Christopher Reeves and things like that, right? And we had Ace Frehley. Now, Ace Frehley, part of Kiss. If you are of a certain age, I would love to be able to put a number on exactly how old you have to be to have lived in a world of Kiss back in the 70s. I talk about often how I'm just old enough where I can kind of remember the world pre Star Wars, but I grew up mostly in the world after Star Wars. That pop culture, the movies, the way things changed, the resurgence of sci-fi, things like that. I grew up in that world, right? But Kiss has that beat because I don't remember a world without Kiss of some sort, right? So as a little kid of Kiss, in the 70s, I would ride my big wheel around the neighborhood. We lived in a trailer. The mom would work, the stepdad would stay home, well, for whatever reason, and I stayed outside. And I would go around the neighborhood dragging a kite on the back of my big wheel, and I would collect the bottles out of the ditches and things. And I could go across the street of the main street, to a national market, and I'd be able to get money for those bottles. I wasn't supposed to cross the street because I was 4 and 5 years old doing this, right? And then I would cross the road back because the trailer I lived in was back to back with an old mom and pop shop. And I've mentioned this many times. I would take that handful of change and I would get Superman cards, wacky pack stickers, and Kiss cards. I would go through the couches. I would go through the people who had slept on their couch and stuff or passed out and actually get some change that way. I would go through the pile of dirty laundry in the bathroom and get changed that way. I would actually have a glass bowl full of pennies and stuff like that. I was so resourceful as a kid getting change, if you follow me, right? And it was those Kiss cards that would pile up. That was what I had most of, right? And then in the house, the stepdad, the old man, gone to the Kiss concerts, got posters there, had the posters out of the albums, and his bedroom was just layered with Kiss posters. And then in the corner with a table, he had his stereo system, the milk crates full of albums. And the only albums I remember are the Kiss albums. I want to say there was some Yes albums in there. I don't know. I don't remember. But it was the Kiss albums, right? So the Kiss would play constantly. It'd be Black Sabbath and Kiss and Creedence and all that stuff constantly in the house, right? So from 78 to about 82, I had planned 81, probably 81. I had planned every year of what member of Kiss I was going to go to on Christmas. So Kiss was there every Christmas. Every Halloween, I was a member of Kiss walking around. And then I remember the talent show in 1978 at school. I made the front page paper where we made a robot outfit out of cardboard, if you will, and they spray painted it gray. And I went out and did some weird robot dance. And then we got to this in kindergarten, but the same day when you got to the fifth graders, they had dressed up as Kiss with their homemade costumes. And to this day, I cannot remember if they lip synced or actually played live. It didn't matter because that is what Kiss did. Kiss gave you that magic to pick up a guitar, to be innovative, to emulate the costumes and to dress up, and they were bigger than life at the time. And the 70s sucked, guys. I mean, I still talk to people at work and things just a tad older than I and things like that, and we all remember it the same. The 70s sucked, but we had the magic. I got to grow up in the magic. 78 to 82 is a magic time, and I'm glad I was there for it. The rise of the video games and things like that. And then all of a sudden, what does this relate to? Well, Kiss was bigger than life. They were comic books come to life, and you get straight to Ace, right? You get straight to Ace coming out with his guitar solos and the smoke coming out, and there's this mythos around him like he was a man from outer space, when actually he was Space Ace, the spaceman. If you go into the 90s comics, he was the celestial being, basically because of his attitude of kind of being spacey and stuff, right? He had that rock and roll attitude that all this is supposed to be fun. He never had a music lesson in his life. He couldn't read music. And when he went to the audition to become a member of Kiss, Gene and Paul had already had a record deal set in place, but they did not like the band and what they had, so they abandoned it and started from scratch. They left Wicked Lester and dissolved that and started out with a new band, which became Kiss. And they had Bruce Kulick, who was a member of Kiss for 12 years. His brother had actually auditioned. The way I heard it, he was kind of walking out as Ace Frehley was walking in with two different colored shoes, and so on and so on. Now, Gene Simmons was a huge comic book collector. In the late 60s and early 70s, he would go around the neighborhood of New York and put up flyers saying, I will buy 1 pound of comics for $1. So people would call him up. They wanted those freaking degenerate comic books out of their house, and sometimes they would give them to him. So he built up a huge golden age, silver age collection practically for free, and $1 at a time for a pound, and things like that. And then Gene Simmons, the whole idea of what he did, his wings on his demon costume came from Jack Kirby's Black Bolt and probably a few other places. Ace, Gene, Paul, and Peter all had distinct personalities coming through that, and they look like comic book people come to life, which comes into where I'm going with this, right? So when I was probably about 4, I ended up looking up this concert that I went to, but this was bought in a 7-Eleven in Johnson City when Kiss was, I don't know if they were headlining, but it was Kiss and a band called Angel, which, I never heard of. And I was about 4 years old. This is the actual Marvel Special #1 that has dissolved over the years that I have read millions of times. All right. This is where I became a Doctor Doom fan. Steve Gerber, Shima, all these great guys coming out here and doing this, right? Uh, they became part of the comic book world. They have Gene and Paul going through New York while he's holding a Savage Sword of Conan book, going on a big rant, because it's the 70s, pretty much talking about how the 70s suck and stuff, right? But that was the day that I remember being down in the pit. I remember the smell of Marlboros and Cools and weed and some kind of liquor and stuff, and it's just normal, and some kind of weird body odor like a dirty beard and stuff, right? And then in the show, it came time for Gene to come out and spit the blood and to paint himself, right? And I remember watching that, walking out as Gene was painting himself. My mom was trying to walk me up, but I'm watching over her shoulder. But before that happened, I got to see Ace do this fantastic guitar solo during that show where his everything smoked and it was bigger. And I swear I remember the guitar flying over, right? So I got to see the best parts. As I got older, I started realizing my favorite songs were by Ace Frehley. Cold Gin, 2000 Man, Fractured Mirror, Hard Time, Talk to Me. And then, of course, as time went by and we didn't have MTV and things went on, I would have to catch them on any show, any interview that I could find them on. And I remember one of the last ones I actually watched was where Peter Criss had left, and they were publicly showing people the Fox, Eric Carr, on a little show called Kids Are People Too. And then over the years, I might have caught I knew Ace was gone. I kind of wondered, what do they do? What do they do? They don't have to work like this anymore. And one of the and I remember when Frehley's comic came out, and I remember he did Rock Soldiers, and that was the story of where he had been and what happened to him. And then he had trouble walking and things like that, right? So it was kind of cool to see that Ace was there. And then for me, Skid Row had come out, and I saw some performance where they were doing Cold Gin, and then Ace was with him at some point and stuff, right? So it's not so much being a huge Ace fan, is that we have lost a large part, a man who made a mark, who inspired a lot of the bands, a man who was the spirit of rock and roll. And I don't remember a world without them in it. I also remember the Kiss Unplugged of 95 or 96 on MTV. And when they brought him out, and we had Peter Criss and Paul there with Eric Singer, Bruce Kulick, and all of them, and people were yelling, "Now this is Kiss," and that led to the reunion tours and stuff, right? I also remember Ace Frehley being on Tonight Show with the Roots. I remember some other stuff. It's just whenever Ace popped up, I was like, "All right, cool, man." All right, so that's it. We have lost Ace, man. So it does have comic book ties. It has space ties. Um, Space ties, excuse me, sci-fi ties, rock and roll. I remember watching Kiss versus the Phantom of the Park on TV, and even then I knew it was cheesy and bad, but I was like, it's Kiss. They did no wrong. I had my color form set. I had my lunchbox of Kiss, so yeah, it was in there. Okay, Gretzky is here. What's up, brother? I'm going to miss Ace. Boondocks 90. As a 4 and 5 year old, the first song my parents heard me sing was Rock and Roll All Night. All right, guys. And the Sumerian. Good evening, sir. Never really cared for Kiss sound, but you couldn't escape the presence. Yet another of our generation's heroes gone. I feel so old. And Comic Crap. Rest in peace to the Space Ace, the 2000 man. Absolutely, right? So again, I really like what was said there. I think it was by the Sumerian. If you weren't in Kiss, you felt the presence. There's no doubt of what happened. Kiss was one of those bands that made people pick up a guitar. It was one of those bands that made people get up and be innovative and do some cosplay, if you will, and stuff like that. They created this world, you know what I mean? The Kiss Army, the first time with a fandom and stuff, right? You knew who they were. There was a Kiss Day and things like that, and he was in there, right? So when it comes to comics, I showed you guys this. This is the Marvel Super Special where they supposedly put their blood in there. Carried this around since it came out. That's a legacy book, carried down from everything. They republished both of those a couple decades ago in this special, the Marvel Super Specials. They did have a sequel, and it was bad. First one is fantastic. Kiss started having other comics come out because Gene loves the comics. He gets to have all the art. He owns all the art when they do things. So, Wizard Magazine came out with a sketchbook and some interviews and stuff as an insert to one of their books. And of course, what Gene Simmons doesn't own, the only Kiss artwork in comics he does not own, Howard the Duck. the cameo and then first appearance, where the first appearance is actually the cameo. We need to really, people have too much money invested in Incredible Hulk 181 to admit that Incredible Hulk 180 is actually the first appearance of Wolverine. So where people have so much money invested, issue 300 of Spider-Man is not the first appearance of Venom. Even in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, it says 299, I think. Things like that. It's people, there's too much money invested for people to back up and correct history and stuff, right? I also have, what was really great is there was a company called Rock and Roll Comics that did unauthorized biographies of bands, and they covered everybody, and they were unauthorized. So when they did their Kiss issue, which I have, I don't know if it's a first print or not. Gene and them didn't really get mad, from what I understand. They just went ahead and bought up the comics, bought up the issues, bought them all to give us the rights, and they ended up selling them at their conventions and at their concerts and stuff. Right. So that's what I'm trying to say. There's so much zeitgeist, what's going out there and stuff. So yeah, that's that. Okay. Okay. So that's that, man. Yeah, I can't say that I was really surprised. For anybody that doesn't know, from what I understand, Ace fell in his home studio and apparently was all right from that. But then he had another fall a few weeks ago, and that one caused the brain bleed. And I started hearing that he was in a coma, that he had a stroke, and things like that. And then it finally came out he passed away. And when they announced online that he had passed away, there was people who doubted it. And I actually tracked it that day, checking in every now and then, and I saw the Wikipedia page get changed. I saw the Google page change, where people were finally officially declaring that he had passed away, right? So, the man has returned to outer space, is all there is to it. Okay. So let's move on to other things here. Some other news, because one is a great thing, and the second thing that I'm going to talk about is sort of I don't know, a little bit of a vindication for me, I think, but there's great things that have come out. And I got the news, I received the news from the horse's mouth on Facebook before I heard it anywhere else. A great friend Gore Vidal had sent me a link yesterday about an interview of Rick Vetch doing this, but on Facebook, and that's what I'm pulling up here. I'm not going to get fancy. On Rick Vetch's Facebook page that I follow, um, he had announced it. I saw it here before anywhere else, that at New York Comic Con, they had announced that they were backing up and they were going to not republish, finally publish the missing issue. And it turns out there's going to be 4 of them instead of 1, of a storyline that he was doing. And I listened to just enough of the interview on YouTube where he's talking about this, about what happened back then. We've heard it forever, right? So just to kind of back up and tell you how things are, there are several things that happen in the 80s and 90s with books. We had things like Camelot 3000. Its ending was well delayed for years, right? We had Watchmen. We had its ending delayed. Dark Knight Returns, we had its ending late and delayed, right? We had the Last Galactus story by John Byrne in Epic Illustrated. Epic Illustrated was canceled before he finished the book, and we never got to see the ending. Miracle Man had its problems to where we waited, we thought, 20 years to get the last issue and the ending of the Neil Gaiman story, and it ended up being taking Marvel over 10 years to get their act together, just to have us get the stories and see where it was going, to have the last issue delayed and probably never come out because Neil Gaiman got in trouble. Neil Gaiman also plays a part in, when we talk about the Sandman Netflix series here in a minute, right? And then in the midst of all this, you had Alan Moore. Howard Chaykin and a bunch of guys were working at DC. And we had Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen. People were getting grim and gritty, giving their heroes feats of clay, getting a lot of mature themes inserted into actual mainstream comics. And Karen Berger and Jeanette Kahn had met with Rick Vetch. Rick Vetch had been working on Swamp Thing with Alan Moore. He did a solo issue here and there during Alan's run when he took a break or whatever, did a little one shot. And who could follow Alan Moore after his phenomenal required reading run on Swamp Thing. Well, Rick Veitch did it. He did some great things. He picked right up. And one of the things he was doing was a time travel story with Swamp Thing, where Swamp Thing was going to go back in time. And due to Jesus Christ being on the cross, Swamp Thing was going to meet Jesus. At the time, they had instated a standards and practices set of rules at DC because of all the things that Frank Miller and everybody was pushing the envelope. And Rick Veitch talked about Howard Chaykin also. That was a big reason a lot of them left DC, according to Rick Veitch, was these standards and practices. But they told Jeanette Kahn and Karen Berger, both told him, like, we can work around this. If we you give us the outline of your story and you work with us, we can get around these standards and practices so you get your story. And then they just pulled the rug out from under him, right? And they had other people come in, finish up the storyline, and it's been something that's been, what is that, 37 years now of never thinking we were going to get to see that. And I think one of the things that Rick Veitch ended up doing was a book called Brat Pack, where he was kind of sickened by the comic book industry that way, and he brought it all out in this Brat Pack miniseries and stuff, right? But anyway, he's kept working. He does his own books, and he sells them on Amazon Prime. So all of a sudden, we're going to get Swamp Thing in the spring of 2026. We're going to not get just one issue of Swamp Thing to finish that storyline out. We're getting 4 issues, I think, as we are right now. And this is a great thing. So for me personally, hanging in with comics for as long as I have, the only thing left for me, honestly, is getting that last Galactus story by John Byrne. Who knows? Who knows? I want to say we will never get it, but who knows? Maybe we will. Um, and then there's the other thing where I kind of get where they were coming from. I hate to be this way, right? But there's certain things that I have problems with, but you'll notice I'm not for censoring anything. I'm not for getting rid of it. I deal with it personally, or I get rid of the books and I move on. I don't dwell on it, right? But like one of the biggest things with the Sandman books that I have a problem with is that, to me, you do not take Satan, Lucifer Morningstar, the ultimate evil, and you don't make him a sympathetic character. I don't care what the Rolling Stones sang about, sympathy for the devil. No, that's not what he is, right? If there's ever a 100% bad guy that you ever needed, it would be Lucifer, right? Even in the comics as a kid, when I saw Son of Satan in Defenders and I don't know, whatever it was, Marvel Premiere that was laying around, I was like, this would not be a good guy. You know what I mean? I'm like, what are we doing? Even as a kid, I would look at him and I'm like, hey, he wouldn't be a good guy. So imagine my surprise, lack of, about 10 years ago, where they finally turned him into a bad guy, and that came and went and stuff, right? Things like that. But I did not appreciate. So yeah, there was this thing about, do we bring in a story about Jesus and stuff like that, right? So yeah, I can kind of get where they were cautious, but who knows? Who knows how I would have reacted back then? I mean, I didn't. This was a direct market book. There's no way for me to predict when I would have finally got to read that, or if I would have read it. I don't know. But the other thing is that I also don't appreciate hypocrisy. They just a couple years later, we had Garth Ennis come out, and he hit big. And then he started doing his he started doing his Preacher books, The Preacher, through Vertigo. This was the book that was going to pick up and take over and be the #1 book because Sandman was winding down and things like that. And apparently the subject matter didn't bother Vertigo at all because they went forward with the book. But I also had a problem with Garth Ennis proudly proclaiming that he's atheist, but he had no problem playing around with these things to come up with, you know, the main plot and story of Preacher book. Okay, so there's that. I actually had to come to terms with getting to where I could read Preacher. It's fiction. This isn't real. He's not trying to indoctrinate people. This is the story. This is the plot. He's playing with things. He had a lot of things in there that were actual literary techniques and things. He had a great characterization. He has one of the greatest stories in there, To the End of the World. It had merit. You follow what I'm saying? And it took me a while to get there. I now have, quite a bit of the Preacher books and probably close to a full set of the trades and stuff. And I was able to read and get through it and stuff, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at. There's some aesthetics and things like that that happen, but it's not the end of the world at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Okay, what do we got here? Comic Crack. All right. Comic Crack. We went out as Kiss for Halloween when I was 10 and 11. They were huge for me. Actually, the last time I dressed up as Gene Simmons was probably 1999, to be honest with you, now that I think about it. We went out for Kiss 2000, 99, 2000, who knows. Comic Crack. They were huge for me growing up. Loved everything about them. The theatrics are something that followed me through all interests in all sorts of musics. And then we have the Sumerian. Did you care for the movie Detroit Rock City? Shannon Tweed stayed very well. I loved Detroit Rock City. Absolutely loved that movie. Even though I can say that the 70s sucked, there are things that I can kind of miss. I miss. It seems like we were able to be more in the moment. I mean, I was 7 years old in 1980. You follow what I'm saying? I could not stand the fashion. I could not stand the bell bottoms. I could not stand the strung out freaks everywhere. You know what I mean? They were everywhere. The hippies that couldn't let go, the people that were strung out, the people with the bad mustaches, things like that. The Doobie Brothers. I didn't like the drug culture, and it was prominent. It was everywhere, at least around here. Seriously, I don't know how many times that we would go to Pizza Hut, and I'm thinking we're going to have pizza, and it turns out that there was a dude that sold weed out of the back door of the Pizza Hut for like a decade. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. There's so much I didn't like, but we had Star Wars, the Flash Gordon movie. We had Queen. We had a lot of the music coming up, everything like that. I had my record player. We had great toys. I had Johnny Quest and Battle of the Planets on at 6 in the morning on Saturdays and stuff, right? We rode our bikes. You stayed out outside. The skies were bluer. It's what you made of it. You know what I mean? Like, so as a kid, yeah, it's a cool time, but there was a lot of things. I finally got around to reading Micronauts. I have a full set. I'm sort of working my way through. And I tell you what, those first 4 or 5 issues of that kid in Florida in the book and stuff, that is 1979, the way I remember it, so cool stuff. You had the Shogun Warriors coming up and your metal toys and everything, and Micronauts and stuff, right? That was what's going on. Let me check this, guys. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll get up there in a minute. Okay, guys. So yeah, that's coming, and that's great news. I think, in my opinion, man, there's been so many stories that if you've been a long time collector, I just think, like I said, the irony to me is we waited almost 30 years to finish that last Miracle Man story, just to have Neil Gaiman get into his legal situations. And ironically, I don't know if it was Wisconsin or Michigan or something, but it showed up in one of my feeds that in the US, the allegations against him were not so much dropped. It's just that there's no jurisdiction for them to be tried in America, because apparently this happened in New Zealand, if I understand everything. If you know what's going on with Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer. So I thought that was kind of wild. So I don't know. Neil Gaiman just about got by with it. He was so famous outside of comics with his TV shows and movie adaptations and novels and audio and stuff like that, that I was like, he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine, because no major network was covering it. And then it finally happened. You know what I mean? About 6 months into it, it finally hit the mainstream. And I was like, here we go. Right. So that led into canceling his Miracle Man, the last issue. Here we go again. I'm not going to be, I can't see me being around in 30 years to get that book. They canceled Bad Omens on Amazon. I think they're going to wrap it up with the movie. They canceled the DC facsimile edition of Sandman #8, the first appearance of Death. And the one that really hurts, because as I understand it is done, the one thing that I really want is that on Audible, they have radio dramas. That's the only way I know how to put them, of a much more a very faithful adaptation of every issue of Sandman, and they do them in acts. And I think the last act has not come out in about 2 years, because it was ready to go, and because of this, there's nobody knows when it's going to come out. It has James McAvoy voicing Morpheus, Sandman, Kat Dennings as Death, right? It's got some great voice actors, and they're fantastic. I have them all except for that one. And now, Neil Gaiman said they were all ready to go and everything like that until this happened. So I don't know if we're ever going to see that. So, like I said, to get Swamp Thing 89, 37 years later, 36 years later, whatever it is, fantastic. That's great. That's awesome. And going into Neil Gaiman, one of the things that cracked me up, I've been setting on this. You guys have heard me talk about going to comic book conventions and taking trips with Josh, who's done a few live shows here, right? Well, Josh and I were running around, and I checked on something. I was checking on the Audible stuff for Sandman, and then I saw that I don't have Netflix. I sparingly get Netflix. Right, next time I get it will probably be to get Stranger Things to wrap that up, and I'll probably catch up on the last couple episodes of Cobra Kai, and that'll probably be it for me with Netflix. But so Sandman season 1 came out. And it was and before it came out, I did a video where I'm like, I will not be watching this. I personally will not be watching this. I hope people do watch the show and get into the comics, but I could already tell they were not taking the source material seriously. All right. This was not about Sandman. Okay. And they completely crapped on Cinnamon Hadley, who was the inspiration aesthetically and character wise for the character Death. I did a video on it, explained who Cinnamon was, explained the magic, how we just sort of knew who she was in the 90s pre-internet. It was there was a magic, a zeitgeist, everything was there. And oh my, that video, I don't remember. I think it got like 1,500 views, and the comments and the direct messages that went through me to me and stuff, calling me so many names and stuff. Yeah, whatever. It was a big deal. And then I actually ended up seeing 10 minutes of the show. I went to a friend's house. Was I picking them up? Anyway, I was in their house, and they were like, wait a minute. And they were watching Sandman, an episode of Sandman, and it was where they had Joanna Constantine. They were supposed to be doing Sandman #4 with John Constantine. They replaced it with I want to say Clara or something from Doctor Who. She reminds me of Marianne from Gilligan's Island. I hate that I can't think of her name because she's fantastic. But anyway, I got to watch. I'm sitting there waiting for them to go get ready and all this stuff, and I ended up catching. I'm like, this is horrible. It was an absolute horrid show from somebody who knows the comics and stuff, right? And I figured that'd be the end of it. So I pull up my Google on my phone, and I automatically have some little headlines there to click on. And one was a Variety article that was doing a review of Sandman season 2 that came out in June. I'm like, I didn't hear anything about this. This was like August, maybe the beginning of September. I was like, oh my God, that came out. So I did a little YouTube search, right? I saw very few people talking about it. I saw some mainstream YouTube channels like Entertainment Weekly, something like that. You can do the search. Nobody watched this thing. And some people were trying to explain the ending and things like that, right? Nobody gave a shit. That's what gets me. Nobody cared. Neil Gaiman had his legal situation exposed. Now he's persona non grata, or something, whatever they say like that. And so I was just sort of like, well, I'm just going to kind of sit on this, because as Josh and I were driving, I said, hey, Josh, man, did you check out Sandman season 2? He went, is that out? He didn't know it was out. I kind of asked around work a little bit. I know one person at work that checked it out and stuff. They didn't even know, and they still have Netflix. That may be the only streaming service they have. I'm like, oh, wow. So I did a little Google search to see what the episodes were, man. And it was like they went from where they were supposed to start with Seasons of the Mist, I think, or something. I don't know. And instead of this show going on for years and stuff like that, they chopped up the rest. They went from issue 20 to 74 or something, it looks like, and chopped it all up throughout the season. I just saw how they were doing this. I'm like, oh my God, right? So I feel a little vindicated. I'm so glad I didn't get into that. You have a danger with Netflix shows to begin with of you never know what the ratings are. They don't release them, and you never know if you should be invested in a show, because they'll just cut the legs right off at any point and stuff, right? And then you have shows that, they do give you a heads up we're going to be coming back with. Sadly, they take years between seasons. I don't know if that's a good thing or a positive thing. Is that quality? I don't know. There's a certain energy that you get when you just do it and you stay on a schedule. That's why some comic books from the Silver Age and stuff are have a intangible it factor. There's an energy that's there when an artist is in a little bit of a rush and a deadline, and the action is a little more loose and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, that was it. So yeah, Sandman season 2 came and went, and nobody gave a shit. And I'm just sort of like, well, there you go. Oh, Gore is there, man. All right. The Sumerian. I cared. Yeah, Shannon Tweed aged very well. Gorbadal, even Tim. May the booster gold be with you. I mentioned to you a minute ago about sending me the Rick Vetch interview and stuff that I've started listening to while I'm driving. So great to see you, my friend. Oh man, coming at me with the booster gold. Oh my God. And then we have went to a Kiss reunion in '96 when I got out of the military. Drove to Dallas just to catch the show, as I didn't get to see them live in the '70s at their peak. Loved it. Yeah, I always like the idea of how there's a tad bit of transparency there, where they're like, it's a business and they treat it like a business, but that doesn't interfere with them saying that we will always be the rock band that we didn't get to see. So they respect the fans enough to keep that show going. What really got me one time was when I can't remember if Paul ended up having heart problems, but they were getting ready to go on stage for a show. Paul collapsed. Gene had his handler take him to Paul, and while he was getting put on an ambulance, supposedly getting on an ambulance. Paul was saying, "Do not let the fans down. I'm take to the hospital. I'll be fine. Keep the show going." So they went out there and they had one show without Paul Stanley, and you can tell Gene was like, "This is so weird." That was not about money. They did not need the money from one show. You know what I mean? In my mind, I have no doubt about that. So yeah, there are merits to Kiss, man. All right. So, real quick, guys, just to kind of round this off, I actually read an actual comic. Okay, I got some newer comics. I'll probably do something separate at that time, but I actually have a new comic, right? And you are reading this right. This is Kevin Smith presents Archie meets Jay and Silent Bob. Look at that '90s flannel on Archie there, Betty and Veronica and stuff, right? And I didn't know what to expect with this. And then when the book came in the mail, not approved by the Comics Code Authority, guys. And I'm like, oh no, how are they going to get by this with Archie? So if you saw Clerks 3, there's going to be a little spoiler. Okay. Dante died. And this seems to pick up some undisclosed amount of time after Dante has died. And Randall's looking at his little Satanist buddy or whatever, who dresses up as a Satanist. He's not really a Satanist. But anyway, I can't think of his name. But anyway, they're deciding it's time to hire a third person so they can have a little, work a little bit less. And apparently Riverdale is very close to Red Bank, New Jersey. And they hire Archie. And the first thing that Kevin Smith does is kind of show you how Archie was much like Dante, because Betty comes into the shop and he's like, "This is Betty," and Betty's like, "Notice he didn't call me his girlfriend." And then we have Veronica come in. Dante always had two gorgeous girls fighting over him. We had the same. One even brought lasagna. You know what I mean? Like if you know Clerks and stuff, right? So we established that Archie could be there and stuff. And of course, there is filth being talked and dirty jokes all around him. And I was like, dear God, please do not let Betty nor Veronica reach the number 37 in this. And don't worry, it didn't happen. So they mentioned Josie and the Pussycats. They want to go see Josie and the Pussycats in concert. And Archie is like, yeah, we're opening up for him this weekend. And he's going to get them in there. Archie ends up being sick and Jay ends up taking his place, but Riverdale apparently has some great weed. The weed messes him up, if I'm remembering this right, and he gets on stage and he goes full Morrison. Okay, he starts singing 9 to 5, baby, 5 to 9. No one here gets out alive to the Archie crowd. And you got the crowd going, can you please sing Sugar Sugar? The Josie and the Pussycats are off to the side. There's a little cameo of Sabrina the Teenage Witch somewhere in this. She doesn't really say anything. But yeah, Kevin Smith pulled it off. This is Archie in the View Skew universe, and we get to see them in Yeah, I feel, after talking about the blasphemy, I felt of wondering about Rick Vetch's Swamp Thing and Garth Ennis's Preacher and stuff. This made me just as uncomfortable. But there is a book. I mean, this thing is probably, I give it a 6 out of 10, which is a great score for comics nowadays. I feel like, yeah, if you run across it and you're a fan of the Kevin Smith stuff, go ahead and get it. If you're a fan of the Archie stuff, just take a deep breath and remember it's just for fun, right? So that's where we're at. Some of the things we're reading and some of the things that I want to do. I'm in that Halloween mode, right? So we've gotten this out. And I need to finish this, but I'm reading the complete collection of Night Force by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan in the early 80s. Baron Winter and his paranormal, parapsychic, I don't know, team he gets together of dysfunctional people. We're reading that. And I'm probably going to do a little show at some point where I pull out the books for Halloween. And a lot of people, when they do this, they go to the good stuff. Don't get me wrong. It's good stuff, but it's getting predictable. House of Mystery, House of Secrets, the EC comic stuff, Tales from the Crypt, Fault for the Horrors, the Marvel books, the reprints from the 70s and stuff, right? I've kind of gone through and picked out some other stuff that is horror themed, tongue in cheek stuff, right? Probably won't be showing these off or anything like that, but it's just kind of cool to have these. And this is what I mean, Tales from the Expected. But what I want to really do is probably trying to find the books that are really fun horror books where they've done something special. And one of the books I'm probably going to pull out, just to let you know what we're kind of looking at, and hopefully I'll have time to do this show, is I'm going to pull out a part of the great Roger Stern, John Byrne, Captain America run of 45 years ago, my friends, where they bring back Baron. Oh my God, I'm one blank. I'm getting my All-Star Squadron mixed up. Baron Blood, not Baron Bedlam. Baron Blood, a vampire introduced in Roy Thomas and Frank Robbins' Invaders a few years before that. And John Byrne and Roger Stern have Captain America return to Europe, and we get a much more sinister Baron Blood. And it's almost like there's panels where it feels like Captain America in his bright costume is contradicting the environment where he's walking into a universal black and white movie with those foggy streets and cobblestone, with the fog and the cobblestone streets and the full moon and things like that. Lester, quit it. I got a cat trying to get in here. It's throwing me off. So yeah, we'll kind of get a little bit of time to walk through that and stuff. And I got a few other pickups here we'll talk about at some point in time. So anyway, guys, I got to go to work tomorrow. We all have lives to do. So be sure that you have subscribed. Make sure you have hit that bell so you know when be alerted when this is going on. Share this video. Let people know we talk about comics and comic related things and rock and roll and wrestling and literature, and we just have fun here looking at things, right? We do have a fair amount of escapism here and a little bit of appreciation for an art form that is probably going to an art form that I cannot wait for a renaissance where people remember this is also an art form, remember what business they're in and stuff like that, right? So good to have this stuff contained and everything and saved and everything. So anyway, guys, thanks for popping in. Be excellent to each other. Read your comics, leave your comments, share the video, and just be excellent to each other, man. Okay, guys, later.